Sheriff, thanks for joining me.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I am fantastic.
Great.
This is, I shouldn't say, we've done this before,
Yes.
but it's been a long time. And so this is going to be the first podcast of this season, I should say. And hopefully we'll continue to do more of these. And hopefully this isn't the last time I have you on here. But one of the things that I've been thinking about since we talked about doing this room was I really wanted to get to know our candidates, especially the high-ranking ones, parish president, sheriff, the people who make a big difference by the decisions that they make in this parish. And so I want to find out who Jimmy Pohlman is, if that's all right.
Yeah. You can learn a lot about Jimmy.
I hope so. Well, let's start at the beginning then. I really want to know, where are you from? Are you born and raised here, guy? Where'd you come from?
Born and raised most of my life here in St. Bernard Parish. I grew up in Miro and Francis Place. My father, Jimmy, my mother, Doris, and I had my brother, Alan, and of course, my sister, Bridget. My mother died at a young age. She was 44 years old, and my sister passed away a couple of years ago at the age of 61 after a brief battle with cancer.
Interesting. Your mom died at 44. How old were you?
She did. I had just started working at the sheriff's office. I had just turned 19 years old. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And then briefly, not briefly, but when I was in my high school days, we had moved down to Braithwaite, down in Plaquemines Parish. My dad, who worked for the sheriff's office here in St. Bernard, had gotten a job down in Plaquemines at the sheriff's office down there, and he bought some acreage, like 3.5 acres of land, and built a house down there. So we moved down there. And I actually went to high school at Promised Land Academy down in Braithwaite.
I know where that is. Okay, so the neighborhood that's right there, Braithwaite Park, is that where you grew up?
Just below that, it's an area called Scarsdale. It's about 3 blocks away from the Belchase Ferry Landing on the East Bank side.
Gotcha. Yeah, I used to live in Braithwaite Park for about 5 years before I
Yes.
moved back to Miro. So you grew up in Miro. What was Miro like? I mean, as far as I know, there was really nothing back there but trees and forests.
In Francis Place, it was an established neighborhood. It was a great neighborhood, and that was the days that you played outside, not inside. You rode your bike, and you had your neighborhood friends. And when the streetlights came on, you knew you had to be home, and that's when discipline.
Discipline. Did you find yourself in trouble?
I tell you, I'm the youngest out of 3, so I actually learned a lot from what not to do with my brother and my sister, right? So I kind of didn't have to get disciplined a lot. I was a quick learner. But my brother, on the other hand, he was a handful.
You were the good child.
I was a good child. That's right.
All right. How did that? If I can ask a personal question, how did that affect you when you lost your mom?
Oh, it's tough. It's my mother was a beautiful woman, but she was a heavy smoker at the time, and a blood clot had ended up moving through her heart. We was living down in Braithwaite at the time, and she had a heart attack as a result of that. She was rushed to the hospital. Well, let me back up. A day before, she was actually sent to the hospital with chest pains. And they had diagnosed that as pleurisy, which is a fluid around the heart. They gave her some medication and sent her home. The next morning, she was having the classic symptoms of a heart attack. She was rushed by ambulance to the hospital, and later that day, she had passed.
And you were 1 year on the force that time?
Yeah, you just not even a year. I had got hired on in August of 1983, and she had passed March 16th of 1984.
Okay, wow. And then you were married?
Not at that time.
Okay, so when did you get married?
I got married in the early 80s. I tell people I've been married 35 years, not to the same woman, but if you add them all up, it's 35 years.
Yeah.
No, but I've been married twice. I
Okay.
was married for about 5 years, and then was divorced and then remarried years later.
Okay. And so how many kids do you have now?
3.
Okay.
Well, two. I have 2 daughters. My son passed away from addiction, and
Yeah, that's right. I
yeah,
was there for
in
that. I
2016. Yeah,
Gotcha. 2016.
yeah.
That was a while ago. That does not. I remember it like it
Yeah,
was yesterday. I'm sure you do.
it just turned 7 years in September 5th.
Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know that was a tough time for
Yeah, oh
you.
yes, still is,
Yeah, I bet.
still is.
Question then about family. What is your view of family?
Well, I have a deep love for my family. Growing up the way I did in a two-parent household, all the way up to my mother passed, where my mother was, at home, and my father had worked 2 and 3 jobs at sometimes to make ends meet. My mom later had employment, both in a retail store, and then she was head of security for the Woolco Woolworth in our region, all the way until her passing. So just kind of having that component growing up was really, really important. And we don't see a lot of that. Both parents, if there is 2 parents in a household today, they both working. It becomes challenging for some people. But we always like to see, the family component together. I think the result of their kids growing up turn out a lot better than single family, or in some cases, other people raising other people's kids.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Is like, what is the impact that happens to society when you don't have two parents? And it sounds like you had one parent that worked and one parent that stayed home. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the early years, yeah, and then later my mother started working as well.
And then you said today we have two parents that are genuinely typically working. So there's really nobody at the house, or you have a single parent, or you have, as you said, maybe no parents. You have aunts or grandmothers that are raising up the kids. How does that impact our current society in those factors as opposed to when you grew up?
Yeah, well, when you look at me growing up, things were much different. And if there's just so many different layers of it. One, growing up in a 2-parent household. 2, having discipline in the house, having respect all the way around. With respect for your parents, respect for elders, respect for your teachers and the principal, respect for authority in general,
Mm.
respecting one another.
So you're saying those things have gone down since then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can see it not just in my career, I can just see it in society in general. And I think that's why we see so many challenging times today, and not to mention challenging times ahead of us because of those things. And if we don't, roll things back and try to get back to just the basics and have respect for one another and those type of things, I think we're going to continue to see the trend that we have been seeing.
Great. I appreciate that. So my next question was then, how do we get there? How do we do that? How do we get to the point where there is increased respect?
Yeah, I don't know. I wished I knew that answer. We talk a lot about in terms of accountability. We talk a lot in terms of we got to hold parents accountable and the kids accountable for those things. But it's a lot easier said than done. And
Sure.
I talk oftentimes about when we talk about juvenile crime issues, the question comes up, well, Sheriff, what do you do about it? And I think that there's short-term and long-term solutions to these things. Short-term is that when somebody in my world commits a crime, they have to have 1, accountability, and 2, consequences. But what we need to do a better job at is making sure the little kids don't become those kids that we're dealing with today. And I just don't know how to do that, but that's where we need to start. And until we start that, and we talk about, you said you really weren't going to mention about our school, the current events in our school. And I just think in our schools, if we just do a good job in terms of accountability and discipline in elementary school, and then it goes into our middle schools, and then follows through the high schools. We have to do that, and but you need to start then.
Well, there is a study I wanted to bring up that I didn't have it scheduled, but I've talked about it a lot lately. I think it was Harvard that did a study that determined that from age 0 to 5 was when most children's character is developed. So if you think about that, like who's in the home from 0 to 5? Who is the person that is giving instruction or encouragement or teaching these little lives what is good and what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. And so when you talk about, two parents being gone or, one parent in the house, like there's clearly there might be something that's missing. And so I agree with you. It can't start at the high school. Once you start something at high school, we're kind of past the problem. We have to start at an earlier age, elementary school. And so what can we do in the elementary school? Like, I know that I've asked questions and you heard the same question. Well, we got to hold parents accountable. But I mean, I've talked to judges around here, like you can't hold a parent accountable for
Yeah.
what a kid has done.
Yeah.
I understand the anger.
Yeah.
I understand the frustration, but this seems like a cultural issue, not just a individual or an isolated issue.
Oh, and it is. And the reason why I talk about I'm not suggesting that you hold parents accountable, but I have opportunities to go speak to, let's say our ninth grade academy and talk to those kids. And we talk about, drugs and all the things that we kind of talking about right now. One of the things that I always bring up is, and I bring it up just to get the reaction. It was a couple of things, but one of them just recently I talked about juvenile crime. And I said, some people say that you need to hold the parents accountable only to get the reaction. And it quickly comes out, some kid says, well, some of these cases, there is no parents.
Right.
It
Mhm.
could be the grandmother, could be the aunt, could be anybody who is willing to raise this child. So, and that's what some kids are growing up in, and it's called trauma. And if you don't know or understand how some of these kids grow up and the situations they grow up in, you're really not going to understand why they do what they do.
Right.
And once you have a better understanding of that, not that it makes the things that they do acceptable, it just makes you understand.
Well, I'll give you a different word. It's empathy.
Yes.
You have to have empathy for this situation because it's not there's no black and white with this. There's not right or wrong because every situation, every child, every family has different issues. And as you key word trauma.
Yeah.
How many of these kids, especially at a young age, already have trauma entering into elementary school? And if we don't identify it at that early of a stage, like what happens when they get to middle school? What happens when they get to high school? What happens when they become adults? We're seeing the effects of that trauma, unfortunately. And I mean, I've talked a lot. I mean, we have counselors here. We do a lot of counseling, and so I'm a firm believer in it. But I don't think that's the end all be all either. I think that's also kind of a healing source, but it's not stopping the trauma.
Right. And
And
that goes back to short term and long term solutions. And until we figure out that long term solution, we're going to have to keep dealing with the short term solutions that I speak of.
agreed, agreed. All right, next question. What is your perspective of the role of government?
Well, that's a good question. It's not one that's easily answered. The role of government is at the different levels of it. But the local level, we're talking about our community, the people who are responsible for the quality of life in our community. And I know it's an election season, and people need to understand that you really have to put a lot of thought in that election process. Although the election process can be ugly at some times, and I think on all levels, from our federal level, state level, and local levels, that the campaign sometimes can be conducted where it's hard to get good people interested in running for public office, and we shortchange ourselves because we limited the people that's willing to serve. And I think this past 8 years we had a good administration. I think we had a good council. I think they served the parish well, along with working together with other elected officials. And our hopes is that people continue to get it right, and that we get the right people in office that can continue to serve our local level. But sometimes I think people depend on government too much. Just talking about governing yourself. Taking a little pride in the way you live and conduct yourself and respect yourself and all those things.
Sure.
So government has a role, right? But we also have a role ourselves to
I'll
be
give you
responsible for ourselves.
Yeah, I will give you a different word for that. Instead of pride, I would say personal responsibility.
Yes.
I think that's where we have dropped the ball in a lot of instances, which even goes back to some of these, instances with the schools and the kids. Like, at what level are we teaching people to be accountable to themselves? At what level do they learn that personal responsibility? I have a responsibility to do X, Y, and Z. And I think you're right when you say sometimes government has stepped in a little bit too much and taken that responsibility, which probably should not have. And I think there's effects from that. And so obviously one of the side effects is people feel enabled or entitled, is the word I'm looking for. Yeah. And so because of that, once you have a mentality of entitlement, the idea of becoming personally responsible, man, that's really hard to break.
It is. And it's a shame. It's a shame, because the people who get after it, work hard, make their way, pay their way, feels like they've been cheated in a sense that when you pay in your own way, and then the government comes in and has giveaway program, and you say, here I am, I did the right thing all my life, I worked hard, I did what I was supposed to do, and sometimes you seem like you penalize for doing that, and compared to people who don't want to do it, and they just get it for free. It's frustrating because it may be free for them, but the taxes that I pay and more taxes I pay, that it gets, and it just gets frustrating, and it seems like it just breaks down the incentives to do the right thing and work hard, and look, I graduated from high school. When I was in high school, I used to work during the summer, and I had to do chores, and right after I graduated from high school, I went to work. Been working ever since, and that's it. But that's just the way that I was raised. That nobody's going to give you anything. You have to get out there and get it.
We've lost that, and because of, and there's two problems I think have occurred, and you hit on one of them, is when people see these things happening, the side effect that happens to the people that are doing the right things grows resentment.
Sure.
And so with resentment comes anger and frustration, and that's not good for the sheriff's department. I mean, you have to deal with angry people. But then on top of that, then it's almost the reverse. Is it's an incentive to do the wrong thing. It's an incentive to take the free thing instead of being personally responsible. So at what point, and I'm a firm believer that I think the local government is more important than the national government. I mean, we get so consumed with all of the national stuff, but the things that really matter in this parish, like
That's
our
right.
local people. And so that's why I want this to happen, because I really feel like we need to get to know who is representing us and what are their beliefs.
Right.
Because once you take personal responsibility out of a society, you will eventually lose that society.
That's right.
So interesting. Perfect. All right. Next question. This is going to be a little bit more difficult. What's your view of religion?
I'm Catholic. I don't go to church like I should. Both my daughters came up in the Catholic school systems. They both doing well. But I believe in God, and I praise God. I just don't attend church probably like I should.
On that, I would ask you a question. Is there a difference between faith and religion?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, based on that then, what is faith?
Well, I think you believe in God,
Huh?
and yeah,
Can you describe your faith?
it's. I believe in God. I'm Catholic. I do. It's a tough one to answer.
I told you
Right.
it was gonna be a tough one.
Right. Yeah.
That is a tough one. And so it's one of the things for me that I think is important, because, and as I've learned in this parish especially, I believe that faith isn't necessarily religious, right? My relationship with God is different than the religious organization that I am a part of, whether you're Catholic or Baptist or Pentecostal. It doesn't matter what organization you are a part of, but your faith in God is a personal thing. It's between you and God. And so the reason that I have this as one of my topics is because we've seen a decline in faith and in religion nationally, but also even locally. I know from my own research and history of this parish, this was a Catholic parish. I mean, everybody went to Mass. I mean, even the Baptists went to Mass, right? I mean, it was There was just one thing that everybody was a part of. Your family grew up in this religious faith. And the moment that you start to take religion out of a community, out of a society, is then changes the perception of what is the standard of right or wrong.
Right. So let me ask you a question
Sure.
with that.
Right.
So seeing a decline, why are we seeing a decline? Is people losing faith?
I would say yes. Yeah, I would say there is a large percentage. I mean, the national statistic shows that um, about 36% of the country attends a religious service now, and I think that that the numbers of faith are a little bit higher than that. I think there are more people that believe in God than, just as you just said, than actually attend a service or a mass. And I think that what has happened, and this is my own opinion, I think the church has moved to a place of irrelevance in people's lives. For whatever reason, it is no longer important, or it has. And here's what I've experienced from the counseling that we've done. There's been spiritual trauma. People have gone to church and they've been hurt, whether it be from a pastor or a priest or something else or an experience that they had. People have experienced spiritual trauma, and so they want nothing to do with it. And then you have some people that, because of their family, their parents or whatever, who they went to church, but their faith in God wasn't displayed in their everyday life. Well, then
Right.
that shows up in the kids. Like the
Right.
kids are like, oh well, he just went to church because he had to.
Right.
So then you send them to catechism or something else, and it's meaningless to them. And then by 13, they want nothing to do with it. And
Right.
that's been my experience in learning about what's going on nationally and locally, especially. And so there is a mistake that I feel like the church has made. We've become irrelevant,
Right.
and in doing so, I think that has hurt our society. And I think that's, as we've talked about, the 4 pillars. I mean, government is important, school is important, sheriff's important, but the church is just as important and just as relevant. And if we're not carrying our weight, we can, affect.
Do we think one's associated with the other? And talking about just the decline of the way things are in society and the decline in the faith and attendance of church. Do you think one has to do with the other, or they working
I think they
together,
work
and that's
together.
why we see the decline?
Absolutely. Because
Yeah.
one of the first things that the Bible teaches in Genesis chapter 1 is the idea of, or Genesis chapter 3 is the idea of personal responsibility.
Right.
The very first rule, Adam and Eve, what happened? Adam was given a task, he was given a job to do. He was given Eve as his partner to work with him, and the rules were clear. Do this and do this, but don't do that. Eve gets, tempted by the serpent, whatever we want to call that, and she talks Adam into taking this fruit, and then they hide from God, and God comes and like, where are you? Like, you can't see them or whatever, like they're little children. And what's the first thing that Adam does when God confronts him with what he did wrong? You know the story?
A
He
little
says,
bit.
God says, did you do this? And Adam says, it was my fault.
Right.
It was her fault.
Right.
And what does Eve say? Well, it wasn't my fault. It was the snake's
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah.
And then Adam comes back and says, well, it wasn't just her fault. It's your fault, God, because you gave me her.
Right.
So our first instinct as humans is to not take responsibility, to blame. And if you look around our society today, like,
It's happening more today.
right?
It's happening more today.
And I believe that is
Yeah.
because a direct result of a lack of faith in our society. It impacts
It's
everything.
the real connection.
Yeah, I think so. So I think that because I care about the local, right? Forget about the national. I care about the local sheriff. I care about the local government, but I also care about the local church doing its job as well. And we need to do a better job to help you, because I think that each one of those levels are interdependent. The government can't do a good job if you don't do a good job.
Right.
And the schools can't do a good job if the government isn't doing a good job.
Right.
But the culture can't do a good job if the church isn't doing a good job.
Right.
So I think we're all dependent upon each other.
Right.
So,
Makes sense.
last question. If you could do one thing to make this parish better, what would it be?
You know, that's not an easy question, and I wish I had a magic wand that I can wave, and I
Sure.
really mean this, that can change a whole lot of things. Change a lot of things about us individually,
Mhm.
right? Change some things about us as a community. Uh, and it goes back down to respect, family, to all those things that we talked about early on, our early conversation. That's the things that has to happen. Uh, the challenges that we face with today is we have to do a better job with the kids.
Mm.
You're losing my son to addiction, and I've been here 40 years, so I know how addiction affects a community. Personally, I know how addiction affects a family. And last year we had 31 people die of drug overdoses.
Wow.
We probably already knocking on 40 this year. Yeah. And it's just different things. The type of drugs, they're much more deadly today than they were many years ago
Sure.
and things like that. So, if we don't do a better job on reaching our young people, our
Mm.
kids,
Mhm.
it's only gonna get worse. It's not gonna get any better at all levels. Now we just talking about the respect thing and the kids growing up and more trauma and all those type of things. If we don't do a better job on raising our kids, and I tell at my dad graduations that I attend almost every single one of them, and when I'm talking to the kids and then I'm talking to the parents and the grandparents in the audience, I remind them that this is our future. And if we don't do a better job with the kids, what kind of future we're going to have? So to try to answer that question, if I had to do one thing, I would say we have to do something with reaching our kids.
Okay. So what's one message? If you could just teach the kids one thing, i- what's the one thing you would want them to know?
Respect themselves.
Excellent.
Respect themselves.
Mm.
You respect yourself, you'll respect others. There's a guy I met at at uh, at a church function, uh, and it was down in Violet. And somebody introduced me to him. His name is you may have met him. His name is Joe Landix. And they introduced me to him. He's about 44 years old and a pretty articulate fella. And so in the first 15 minutes of our conversation, he talked about how he served 25 years in Angola for murder and attempted murder. Uh, he was able to get out of jail after serving 25 years. And he says, Sheriff, he says, I want to do something to help our kids. So I spent a lot more time with Joe, and Joe's an amazing guy. And one of the things he told me uh, is, and we talked about respect, and he says, the day that you start disrespecting your mother, he says, you can never respect anybody again,
Mm.
and your life will spiral out of control. He said it did with his,
Wow.
and it gets back to reaching the youth and teaching them self worth, uh, believing in themselves, respecting others. And he says that's the track that we got to get people on. He says the blame game's over. The blame game's over. He
That's
says
right.
you can blame all the people you want to blame, but you got to look deep inside yourself before you start blaming others. And some of the other conversations he had said, going forward, he says in our school systems, because that was really topical at the time that I was talking to Joe. And he says he just remembered one thing about it. His mother taught him how to fight. Taught him how to fight.
Mm.
Somebody messes with you, you pick up something and crack them in the head.
Wow.
And he said, what my mother should have taught me is how to defend myself.
Right.
He says, because when she taught me how to fight, that's what I used to do.
Mm.
He used to fight. He used to be the one fighting people. He used to be the aggressor always. And he says, had she taught me to defend myself, I would have been a defender. I can defend myself and I can defend others. And that's something that's simple.
Yeah.
right, resonates about what we continue to talk about
Hmm.
is taking care of yourself, doing the right thing.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I've tried to teach my children is one of the creed. We have a Woodward creed. One of them is to defend the weak.
Yeah,
I mean, that is your role, but you first to be able to defend the weak, you have to know who you are and why.
yeah,
That's important. And so I agree. Like, it's not that the fighting is always bad, but it's the motivation behind it. And we have a lot of parents still today that are telling their kids the same exact thing that your friend
yeah,
was told. And remember, think about with the very beginning of this conversation, from 0 to 5, your character is set. And who shapes that? The people that are
sure,
closest to you in your life, your mother, your
sure,
parents, your daycare worker, somebody.
sure.
So crucial to learn those things early on. All right. Any questions from you?
No, but you don't have any other questions? This seemed kind of short, man.
Well,
We
I
should.
asked you some tough
There's a
questions.
lot of things we can be talking about, man.
Well,
We can
bring
talk
it.
about. We can talk about. What we doing,
Well, that's what I wanted to. I wanted to know. Like, yeah,
yeah,
and that's where I was hoping
yeah.
some of this would go. Tell me what you're doing.
So
What are you doing that's different?
I think I don't know how different it is, but we take a lot of proactive approaches on things. But just talking about the addiction problem we have, we still fully fund. I do our DARE program, and in the future we'd like to even expand that. And our DARE programs, we reach all the fifth graders in the entire St. Bernard, and we talk about just bullying. We talk about alcohol abuse, drug abuse. We talk about uh, tobacco. We talk about a lot of things.
Based on that, how do you think that's going? How long you been doing DARE?
We've been, gee whiz, man. We've been doing there probably at least 20 years.
Okay. So my
Yeah.
question then was, how's that working?
Well, that's a good question because it's hard to gauge, right? Because the way you're going to gauge it if you didn't have it, you know what I mean? So I think it gives us an opportunity for one to interact with every fifth grader in St. Bernard Parish at an intimate level. So I think it helps with relationships between our kids and law enforcement because it's uh, positive things going on between us and the kids. I think it gives us an opportunity to bring awareness about drugs. We have follow-up programs like into the ninth grade. We talk with Charles Kazar. We go in there and we talk about uh, the effects of drugs, both on the families, on the communities. We have some more interaction with going in at ninth grade. It's a little easier to talk to than versus a fifth grader
Hmm.
about personal interactions. We talk about, does anybody know anybody who's on drugs? We talk about, does anybody know anybody who died as a result of a drug overdose? We discuss those things candidly, and unfortunately, most people raise their hands. And then the interactions that you can have one-on-one with the kids after that. Usually some kids will come talk to you and they'll give you, my father's in your jail, or my mother's in your jail for drugs, and do you know them? And those type of things. And it's sad.
Sure.
It really is sad that you're talking to a ninth grader who's growing up. One of them had both parents in jail.
Hmm.
She was a ninth grade female, and I'm saying, what chance is she going to have?
Right.
Think about that, so. We have an addiction resource program with Stanley Simeon. We proactive with somebody overdoses. Stanley's going to go visit with them the following day. He's going to visit the family. We're going to try to get them in treatment programs.
Right.
There's a lot of positive things we did. We had the opioid settlement funds is starting to roll in, and we working close with the district attorney's office and the parish president on creating another program that we can help people at all different levels and spend some of this opioid money on education, on treatment, and follow up programs like drug court to try to help that. So that's the things that we do on that end. The school system. Today we're going to announce that we add an additional school resource officer to Shellman High School. That'll give us 3 at the Shellman High School and 2 at the Raleigh campus. To try to help with that. It's to me, it's disheartening that we have to have cops in schools to manage kids.
What's the role of these resource officers so everybody knows?
Yeah, well, I tell, including our school administrators, that our role is to enforce the law and become positive role models to the kids in the school. We're not there to enforce the rules. That's the school's
Right.
deal, So, but it's unfortunate we have to have a police presence in the school.
Sure.
I never had them in my schools when I grew up. They never needed them.
Right.
When a teacher saw two kids fighting, they said stop. It stopped, and that was it. And you get sent to the principal's office, and then your dad would come over there and want to kick your butt because you got sent to the principal's office. I remember my dad didn't even ask me my side of the story.
Right.
Today, the parents, they want to kick the principal's butt.
Right.
It's different.
So let me ask you that then. So times are different. People are different. Has your DARE program changed over that time? Is it adapted because the same things that we learned 20 years ago don't work
Yeah.
today?
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. And it adapts to bullying has been added, vape products has been added, a different type of drugs have been added. So, but the premise is the same, that it's about choices, right? And that you have to make good choices. And that's the same,
Mhm.
but you just deal with different things. Today, fentanyl can come in and that's really deadly.
How big of an issue is fentanyl in this parish?
Oh, it's a big issue. I think that's the deadly dose of things that's killing most of these people in drug overdoses. And how did we adapt to that? Right? We have Narcan. You have Narcan in schools now. You have Narcan in every deputy's car. You have Narcan on every EMS unit, every fire truck. We talk about 30 to 40 people dying. We probably say 300 to 400 people that overdose.
What's the cause? Why are so many people doing drugs?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it's the same cause it was as long as I've been here. Uh, it can start. I tell people there's many pathways that you can go down to become addicted. It can be somebody who's socially using alcohol and drugs, and it progresses. It can be somebody who's masking mental health issues. It might be a way that they can escape their personal issues, mental health issues, including depression. It can be a car accident. It can be a sports injury that you got addicted to pain medication. There's many pathways that you can become addicted to drugs, particularly opioids. But once you're there, it's all the same. Doesn't really matter how you get there. It's all the same because once you're there, it's very, very challenging to get you straight.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many different programs that work many different ways. And some people can have success in one and not another. And then some people can never have success. When I talk to these kids, I remind them, I said, I got probably 70% of the jail is in there. People in jail for a drug-related issue, right? They on drugs, so they might be committing crimes, might be getting caught with drugs and those type of things. But in some cases, they're the lucky ones. And you may ask yourself, how can somebody be lucky and be in jail? I said, well, they're alive.
Right.
As long as you're alive, you still have a shot, right? And once you're gone, it's over. So I explain that to them. I tell them my personal story.
Mm-hmm.
It's somewhat effective,
So
so yeah.
I have a sister who was on heroin as well, and
Yeah.
her husband, and went through a tremendous, tumultuous life for
Yeah.
several years.
Oh, yeah.
With the help of community and good people, they were able to help them get off of
Yeah.
these drugs, and
Yeah.
now she's living a normal life
Right.
with her kids,
Right.
and so she was one of the lucky ones.
Yeah.
She didn't have to go to
Yeah.
jail,
Right.
but her life was turned upside down, lost
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
almost even her whole family,
Yeah.
everything. And so the effects of drugs are tremendous.
It's unbelievable.
They're destructive. They destroy whole families.
Yeah.
And so, but knowing that, know
Yeah.
that, we know that, people
Yeah.
know that, yet
Yeah.
we still
They'll do
find
it.
a way
Yeah.
to a gateway. We dabble a little bit here,
Well,
not thinking
but
it's just
but the
it's just
gate
pot. It's not a
the
big deal.
gateway. Let's talk
Right.
about the gate marijuana.
Right.
We
That seems to be very prevalent in today's culture here.
I understand, but we make a couple marijuana, right? One of them might have been like 36 pounds. One of them was over 100 pounds, and that's an arrest, a bust that we're very proud of, right? So what we do, we release it on Facebook. You wouldn't believe the amount of comments that people say. You should be going after the real criminals. Yeah, 100 pounds of marijuana,
Uh-huh.
36 pounds of marijuana. And today, marijuana, they putting the fentanyl in the marijuana, so that could be your diddly dose right there, smoking a joint,
Mhm.
something that simple, and you don't even know it.
So I know that the state has dabbled with this, and the country has dabbled with legalizing marijuana.
Yeah,
Where do you stand with that?
yeah, against it.
Just
Uh,
because it's a gateway?
I feel it's a gateway. My son started smoking marijuana. That's right. So, and it all starts when medical marijuana, right?
Mhm.
When they first passed medical marijuana, it was for to treat like maybe four things. And in maybe one or two ways as a delivery method, whether it was a drop, or a pill form or something like that. And then every year that the legislature goes in session, they add more things that need to be treated with medical marijuana. And then they also add, different ways, more ways to deliver it, and including smoking it.
Mhm.
Now, and some people say that's just a way to kind of ease their way into legalizing marijuana.
Sure. And that's the big thing is
Yeah.
the big push is that it's not a big deal. It's like getting drunk.
Yeah.
It's like drinking. Like
Right.
what's the difference? Like
Right.
we have this that's legal. Why
Right.
shouldn't we legalize this?
Right.
And that's being pushed from
Sure.
lots of different
Sure.
levels.
Sure.
Federal government, there's
Yeah.
a lot of people that
Yeah.
are really wanting that.
It is.
So how do we get this message
Yes.
out there? Like, look, this is destructive. This will destroy lives.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of parents. I mean, I've been to some of the DARE programs where they're chuckling in the back
Yeah.
as they're talking
No.
about, like, yeah, we're graduating and we learned this and that. And
Yeah.
I'm looking around thinking, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
what are these kids going home to?
Yeah. I tell people, I said, if we do, one of them, of course, the biggest thing is drug education, but it goes all the way back to when you talk about 0 to 5. You know
Right.
what I mean? But I think you ought to have drug education every single year in school, starting up from first grade all the way to 12th grade. And as the grade level goes up, so does the intensity of the drug education. I would pound it in their head every single day. I talk about, and they really think I lost my mind at this point when I tell them, I said, I think we ought to drug test everybody in school. Yeah. My daughters go to Catholic school. They'll do random drug tests there.
Okay.
They'll do hair samples
Sure.
but my reason is
But what happens though if that happens though? Like if you drug test everybody, what happens to the kids that all test positive? Then what?
I, under my plan, it's not punitive at all. If you test positive for any type of drugs, it should be an intervention where we can get you into counseling right away. Because to me, if you catch them in the very early stages of experimenting with drugs, it'd be a lot easier to get them back on track versus just letting it go and letting it go and letting
Sure.
it go until they become, full blown addict and, taking opioids. So,
Mm.
and I explained that to the kids. I said, this is not to be punitive. This is not to get you in trouble. This is to get you help. And they'll settle down a little bit, but I say the same thing some of the parents, and I get the same reaction. Some I think the sheriff done lost his mind, but
That's-
but I just want to do it for the right reasons.
Right.
I don't, I want to help you. I don't want to hurt you,
Sure.
right? I want you in school. I don't want to kick you out of school. You need to be in school.
And I think one of the things that we miss as educators sometimes is the idea that we teach information. So you can talk about drugs, you can talk about other stuff, but I think the thing that really is going to connect with the kids is two things. One, emotion. Like I'm not going to remember any of this information unless it's connected to something that emotionally that I can relate to. And then the second part is what you talked about a minute ago was we have to relate to these kids.
Right.
There has to be somebody that they can have these conversations with. Because information, let's just be honest, I'm sure you get information from the state that you learn it and you flush it, right?
Yeah.
You forget it right away.
Right.
Because it's just data.
Right.
It's just information. It doesn't matter unless I connect with it.
That's right.
And so how are you going to connect with these kids? I mean, I think telling them, hey, I want to drug test all of you, that's one
Yeah.
way to
Oh yeah.
that's an emotion, that a fear.
Yeah.
But how else can we connect with them?
Well, I know when I have a unique story. So when I talk to kids, being in law enforcement, having personal experiences with my son and stuff like that, but I can clearly see that don't even click.
Anymore?
Yeah, few kids, more likely the good kids who feel bad for you situation, right?
Sure.
But the kids that I am trying to reach, they don't want to hear it from me,
Right.
right? They don't want to hear from me. But what I've learned is my friend Joe, who served 25 years in prison, who those kids want to hear more from him.
So are you able to bring him into the schools and speak?
He's starting this year, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, I brought him in on a little pilot program. I introduced him to Charles Kazar, and Charles is using him. And like Red Ribbon Week and those type of weeks, we're going to have him in there. But I think Joe thinks I need to be with him. I think Joe, just in a small setting of a classroom, if you got 20 kids or 30 kids in a classroom, just to have candid discussions about where he's been and perhaps where they're going. And maybe he can be just that guy that can connect with some of these kids and say, man, look, you think you're going this way, but this is the way it ends up for you almost every time. When you talk about violent crime and juveniles killing juveniles, and there's a disconnect somewhere.
There is. So
there is a disconnect somewhere, and you have to have somebody that can connect with them. Most of the time, it's not going to be me.
Right. I'm gonna push a little bit on that though, because I think it's important to connect. But what happens when they just hear that once? I think it's important that there's follow through or follow up, consistency. And so my challenge to you would be, what are you doing with the families in this parish to connect with the parents of this parish so that they're the ones following through with the kids? Because you can't parent all the kids at Pohlman High School. There's 2,500 students. Like, they're going to see you once. They're going to see Joe maybe twice. But who is the people that have the most influence on them besides their friends? Hopefully it's going to be their families. And as we said a few minutes ago, like, what are we doing to shape our parents of our parish to be an influence that's positive, as opposed to the parents snickering in the back about the drugs?
Right. It's challenging, and we've met several times, Judge Bob, some community leaders, particularly on the kids that we're trying to reach. And it's the problem that we keep getting challenged with is you're not getting those parents to a place to connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point.
That's my point.
Yeah. So that's been our challenge. You know what I mean? I have Yancey Hazola, who does, he's a coach in a high school during the day. He does some part-time work for us, and he's in the community, and he's with the kids. He knows some of the parents and stuff like that, and he is challenged with the same things. And he describes the parents as knuckleheads. He says, I can't, they don't want to listen, or you try to tell them, and they said, you just working for the cops. That's all you were, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I don't know.
Right.
I just it's challenging to do that. I'm in the community a lot, and I go into some of the tough neighborhoods, and I'll walk and talk and stuff like that. But I find that people who are willing to talk to you and engage you is not the people that you have to worry about. It's the ones that walk off or turn their back on you when you say hello and those type of things. That's the ones that obviously that's why we are where we are.
Right. Yeah, that's difficult. I know that you have coming up, was it one night where you have like these little neighborhood parties?
Yeah.
What's it called?
National Night Out Against Crime.
National Night Out Against Crime. Now, that's one thing that I only found out because Aaron, and I'm good friends with, he's told me about it. But other than that, I haven't seen a whole lot about it. How can we promote that? Because I think that's something that's a way for the community, the neighbors, to connect with other neighbors. Because I think that's what we have to get back to. Like, as you said, growing up, like, you used to go out and play with your friends in the neighborhood. Like, there was a neighborhood feel. And so if you saw the neighbor kids doing something wrong, I mean, I'm sure your neighbor's dad would say, "Hey, Jimmy, stop doing that." We've lost that.
Sure.
And I think a lot of it is because we just don't have a way to connect
Yeah.
anymore.
So we how do you communicate today? Social media, right? It's like as bad as that is. No, I know as bad as it is. But that's how we push it out. And we also push it out to our neighborhood organizations. Like if you have a neighborhood watch, homeowners association, we reach out to those groups, local churches as well
Mhm.
to try to put a party together, and we'll assign deputies to those parties
Sure.
to kind of communicate about the topical about crime prevention, those type of things, and just trying to connect to our community. It's been pretty successful.
Yeah, and I mean here we are. We're on social media, right? This is what we're doing.
Yeah,
Like this is the
yeah,
part of the day and age. But I want to make sure that, and I have to remind myself of this on a regular basis too. The most powerful way to move a message is one on one,
oh, no doubt.
right? It's me having a
Oh,
conversation with
sure,
you. Now that
sure,
takes longer because social media, I
sure.
can blast it out to
Yeah,
thousands of people.
yeah,
But if I really want an impact,
yeah.
I got to talk with you.
In 2011, when I was campaigning,
Mhm.
I went door to door,
Mhm.
right? So I talked to some of the candidates now who said they're trying that, and it's hard to get people to the door.
Yeah, because they're ringing, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to come to the
Right.
door.
So because they come back to me and they say, Sheriff, yeah, how should I, reach people?
Right. And
And that's the tough. So, so what are you doing with social media, man? Some people, particularly the older folks, they're not into that social media things, but you have to.
right.
So when we doing our recruiting, we do job fairs, go to high school, we go to Nunez Community College. Uh, we do social media, right? And we also was doing radio. But as applicants come in, we ask them, how did you hear about us? And the only two ways they heard about us is either word of mouth or social media. So I'm off the radio now. We back on to just sticking to the social media and the word of mouth things.
Mhm.
So, but that's just where we are today in communicating,
Right.
So it's been somewhat successful, but it's still, slow.
Mm. So what's your greatest hot button then for your position? What's the thing that keeps you up at night?
Probably 290 employees, most of them out carrying guns and responding to calls and driving fast with lights and sirens on. That's one of the things that keeps me up at night. But really, we are blessed. We're blessed to still have a community that supports law enforcement. We do our best to hire the best and the brightest
Mhm.
to make sure that they're well trained and well equipped and that they treat people right
Mm.
doing their job. But I do realize, I've been on a good run. I have been both, professionally, politically, and that I just remind people that it can be any moment that things can go horribly wrong for us.
Mhm.
And when sometimes when it happens, you lose the public's trust. And I find in my career, my 40 years plus, you never want to lose the public's trust.
That's
If that
true.
answers your question.
Absolutely. So then based on that, what can our community here do for you to help you in
Oh,
your
it's
job?
it's simple. When you see a cop, thank them.
Okay,
Tell them,
that's
say,
great.
we really appreciate the job y'all doing out here, and we support y'all. It
Do they hear
goes,
that ever?
yes,
They
I hear
do.
it all the time,
Okay, good.
and I tell them, don't tell me,
Right.
tell them. That's it. Listen. I'm just you're blessed to be the guy that's in charge. If you want to make an impact, tell those guys because truly, that's the guys out there every single day that's doing the work. Right,
Yeah.
every single day they are out there doing the work. Tell them thank you, appreciate the job
Mhm.
you're doing. I feel safe.
Mm, that's
Yeah,
great.
that's it. That's all it takes. Just hearing it from the public.
Well, gosh, don't we all need a little pat on the back every once in a while to make us feel like we're doing a
Yeah,
good job?
yeah. People tell me all the time, Sheriff, I never hear anybody say anything bad about you. I said, well, you haven't talked to them about it.
Yeah,
So
that's fantastic. Well,
yeah,
I hope we can do that. I hope we can get that message out there that every officer needs to hear. Like,
yeah.
hey, thank you.
It
You're
goes
doing a good job.
it goes a long way.
Absolutely.
It really does.
We all need that. All right. Well, thank you. I think that's unless I got another hot topic for you. I mean, one more.
Go ahead.
where are we with dads in schools?
That's a good question. We had Aaron do some research and kind of define their
Mhm.
roles in the school. And when we pitched it twice, once was at the school board meeting. That was something that I just kind of blurted out,
Oh yeah,
and
you were all fired up.
seemed like we got a good response
Sure.
about people. But people followed up; they want to know where we are with it. So, well, once we complete our research and we presented it, the findings of our research at the town hall meeting that that they put on for the schools, and it seemed like they were going to explore the program Driven and maybe expand off of the Driven program because it was kind of already established in the school system and trusted in the school system, and kind of expand on that. I told them I would provide any assistance I can, including background checks and those type of things, and try to find volunteers to participate in both programs. So that's where we left it.
All right, fantastic. So it is
Yeah.
still moving forward.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
excellent. Well then, how can I serve you?
Well, keep praying for us, which I know you do, right? And
Absolutely.
we appreciate you, of course, your friendship. You've been a blessing to St. Bernard's since you guys showed up. And it wasn't just you; it was a team of you guys showed up and decided to make St. Bernard your home, and you're having a tremendous impact, and we appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and I will
Yeah.
continue to pray for you guys. So thanks for coming. This
Yes,
was great.
sir. I appreciate it.
I
It was
appreciate
great.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And I think you're doing a good job as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So,
Matt, as always, man.
Absolutely.
Always good conversation.
this was great.
Yeah.